Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel English Literature with Sumi. So today in this video we are going to discuss about the Anglo Saxon period's prose part and also the development of literary forms, the development of literary style, and also how the Anglo Saxon period came to an end. So if you have not watched my previous video on the Anglo Saxon period, the link will be in the description box. And if you have not gone through my earlier videos description box, please go and check it, because there I have already discussed about the Anglo Saxon period, how it originated, and all the important details are in there. So this will be the last video on the Anglo Saxon period. I hope that after this video there will be no difficulties in dealing with the Anglo Saxon period and the history of English literature. First part will be completed with this video. So let's get started. So as you can see, I have mentioned over here that prose can be divided into four parts: Alfred, Ælfric, Wulfstan and Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Alfred, Ælfric and Wulfstan, these are the three writers, prose writers specially, and Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is the chronicle of the age. It is the first history work. Then we come to the writer Alfred. Now Alfred, he is called the father of English prose. We are not going into the father ages, but he is the first one who is named as the father of English prose. Later when we study other periods, this title will be given to some other persons. So first of all, he is known as the father of English prose. Then he is known chiefly as a translator. A translator is one who translates works from other languages to his own language or to a language which is mostly available in his surrounding areas. So Alfred, he wrote 5 important translations which include Pastoral Care of Pope Gregory, The History of World of Orosius, then Bate's Ecclesiastical History, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, and Soliloquies of St. Augustine. Now these 5, these are not his own works, he just translated it. As we have earlier studied that Bate constructed his ecclesiastical history, and so Alfred the Great, he just translated it in his own language so that it had a wider public to read it. So now these 5 translations, we do not know the exact chronological order of these 5 translations is not certain. But one thing is certain, that the Pastoral Care is his first translation and the Soliloquies of St. Augustine is his last translation. Now, so Alfred, nothing much is known about him, only these few facts about his life is known to the people. Then we come to his prose style. His prose style is simple, straightforward. That means he wrote in a very simple style which is easily understandable by the people. So he was an artist of considerable natural ability. Now what is meant by natural ability? Natural ability means the ability to write something without putting on any extra efforts or any artificial efforts on your part. So he has a natural ability to translate his works. Now we come to Ælfric. Now let us come to Ælfric. Ælfric was a churchman who later became abbot of Eynsham in 1005. He was best known for his grammar. So he had composed a grammar during the Anglo-Saxon period. His works were mostly of homilies. Now his works include Catholic homilies and the lives of saints, and these 2 works and other works as well are all related to his church work. So he has a remarkable skill of putting complicated ideas or thought into narrative form. Now he was one such writer who could make you understand complicated thoughts in your mind by analyzing it, by discussing it with you people. So he could actually turn something complicated into a really simple way, which makes the readers acquainted with his work better. Let us now study about Wulfstan. Wulfstan was Bishop of Worcester and Archbishop of York. His most famous work is Sermo Lupi ad Anglos, known for its vigor, repetition of ideas, and the alliterative nature of its style. So, not much is known about his other works, because as I have already told you in my previous lectures, that in the Anglo Saxon period very little is preserved in the written form and most of the works are in oral form. So nothing much is known about his other works. But one thing is clear, that he has been a most brilliant preacher. So as he is a bishop and an archbishop, preaching is what he liked to do, and he was a brilliant preacher at that time. Now let us come to the Anglo Saxon Chronicle. Although it is the last of the prose section, it is not the least, because Anglo Saxon Chronicle is one of the most important works of the Anglo Saxon period, because it is all about the history of the people. Everything included in it is about how the people lived and what kind of historical events took place during that period. So let us see what features or what is actually the Anglo Saxon Chronicle. So Anglo Saxon Chronicle was inspired by Alfred. Of course, it was Alfred the Great who first inspired its writings. So it is extant in several manuscripts, of which the most important being the A or Parker and the E or Lord MSS, that is manuscript. What is meant by this is that the Anglo Saxon Chronicle is made up of several manuscripts, but the most important of this is the A. They named it as A or the Parker manuscript, and the E or the Lord manuscript. But the reason behind why these two being the important one is not clear till now. So there are many versions and they all end at different dates. That means many writers have written the Anglo Saxon Chronicle in different versions and they all end at different dates. That means there is no clarity regarding in what exact date the Anglo Saxon era ended. The style varies. The style of the Anglo Saxon Chronicle varies from simple notices to long passages of narrative and description. That means it is narrative as well as descriptive. Then it also includes character studies, including that of the conqueror itself. So these can be related to the present day study as well, because in present day study or histories also we could find character descriptions in detail. So in that time also Anglo Saxon Chronicle, it also studied the characters in detail. Now let us come to the development of literary forms. But before starting of how the literary forms develop, let us see or let us understand as well that what is meant by actually development of literary forms. Now there are two types of literary forms in the Anglo Saxon period: prose and poetry. Now in this particular part we will be discussing about how poetry and prose developed, not their style, that would be a completely different section, but how these two developed as a form. So this development, it took place as a result of hundreds of years of slow growth. It was not a rapid growth, but it was a slow growth. Now because slow growth in the sense that I have already told you that oral literature was very much in extent at that time, and other, that means written literature, was in a very low view at that time. So low view or low, that means at that time. So let us see now how these two forms developed. Let us see. Poetry. It appears earlier than prose. That is an important factor indeed, because poetry, it appears earlier than prose, and heroic type of poetry persists throughout the period. Earlier when we were studying poetry in detail, we read about poems like Beowulf, so that is a heroic poem. So heroic type of poetry persisted throughout the period. It did not ended in a certain point of time, but it started from the beginning and it prevailed throughout the period. The epic also existed at that time, but it lacks the great qualities of the classical epic. We will get to know about classical epic later, but the great qualities were not present at that time. Great qualities like seriousness, then detailed descriptions, all these were not prevalent, or all these were not included in the epic of that time. So there were no real example of lyric poetry. Although I have already told you that in poetry section that some poems they had a melancholic tone or melancholy in them or melodious tone, but they cannot be considered lyric poetry. Lyric poetry is completely a different genre. When we will study about different types of poetry, then I will be discussing this in detail. But as for now, there were no real example of lyric poetry in the Anglo Saxon period. Now let us come to the prose. So the prose section. So much of the Old English prose consists of translations from Latin. So I have already mentioned just before, a few pages or a few seconds before, that translations were prevalent at that time. So most of the Old English prose consist of translations, but we cannot disregard the fact that there were other writers on prose as well, like Ælfric. Ælfric, he wrote homilies. What are homilies now? Homilies are religious discourses, and as Ælfric and Wulfstan, they are religious man or religious person belonging to the church, so their works on religion were very important at that time. And the beginnings of historical writings are to be seen in the Anglo Saxon Chronicle. As I have told you that Anglo Saxon Chronicle is one of the most important work of the Anglo Saxon period, and because of that, one factor is that it records the historical events that took place during that time, and also another factor of its importance is because it was the first of the historical writings. After knowing the development of literary forms, let us know something about the development of its style. Now again, while discussing about the development of literary style, it would be easier for us to divide it into two parts, poetry and prose. Now let us first see the development of literary style in poetry. Development took place in greater sureness of handling material, greater individuality of approach, more subtle use of alliteration. Let me explain it to you. So greater sureness of handling material. So the writers, when they use any material, they write it in such a way that you cannot you have to be sure about them. They are sure about them, and then only they wrote it down. Then individuality of approach. If two writers are writing the same concept, they are approaching that concept will be different. That is called individuality of approach. One writer will not copy the same exact thing from another writer. He will approach it in his own way. Then use of alliteration, you all know about it. Then we come to prose. Now in the prose of Ælfric and Wulfstan, we can find an excellent use of alliteration and of rhetorical figures. The personality of the author becomes truly apparent. Now the personality, that is the personality of the author, it becomes truly apparent because in their writing we could find their personality as. I would like to end this history or the Anglo Saxon period with the analysis of how the period came to an end. So after Alfred's death, there is little to record. Little to record about what? Little to record about the period. Now there was the loss of two supreme objects of his heroic struggle after his death, namely a national life and a national literature. So literature was at a completely standstill in England after Alfred died, because nobody initiated any form of writing skills or any other form of development in either forms, whether it be prose or poetry. So the people of England, they had to wait for its revival, and its revival came specially only through the Norman conquest in 1066, which would be a completely different period, which would be called the Anglo-Norman period. So that is how the Anglo-Saxon period came to an end. That's all for today. Hope to see you in my next video, and I will be discussing about the Anglo-Norman period in my next video. So if you do not want to miss any updates regarding history of English literature, do press the subscribe button and press the bell icon as well, so that you can get the latest notification as soon as I upload my video. So till then, bye bye.